about real estate. So we're going to start. I know we have some people here, and I know everyone's busy, especially Keith, Pat, and Frank. They're busy advisors and experts in the area of real estate. We have Keith Conway, Frank Solar, and Patricia Canali. I hope I said your last name correctly.
Did.
Patricia is a real estate agent. She's in the local area in Bayside. And Keith and Frank work for the Fortes Group, which is a real estate management and advisory company. And I met with them, and they really understand how to take your asset, which we're going to be talking about real estate today, and how to really use that to your advantage, to safeguard your family, to look at it estate wise. I know I have conversations. I'm the director of gift planning and the McAllen Society, and I go out and I talk to our alumni about financial and estate planning. And, I know you want to pass your assets and everything onto your family. Certainly, St. John's doesn't want to take that away. However, when you make a planned gift to the university, there are benefits that will help your family, help you, and you can also help a charity. And hopefully, if you look at charities, I hope you think about your own alma mater, St. John's University, because planned gifts are very, very beneficial to the school and to the school's future. And we have a student here, and I know he loves to see the McAllen Society members there supporting him and the future of his education. So that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith. And Keith, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. So
Thanks.
thank you for taking the time, and it's good to see everyone on the call. And I think, Susan, something that you said that I think resonates, that hopefully contextualize what we're going to talk about here is, yes, there are benefits that come to looking at real estate as a potential avenue for you to make an impact with a nonprofit such as St. John's, but what are they? And how can you really know what they look like and what they actually mean for you and your family and the impact you can have? That's really where our firm comes in. Before anyone needs to make any sort of formal decision on, yes, I want to proceed, it's education on the front end to understand what could my impact look like, how quickly can it get done, should I be thinking about it this year, next year, all the different questions, who I need to work with, my accountant, my financial advisor, a real estate broker, an attorney, all these different parties that come into play. That's really where we step in to help educate and let you know the impact that you can be making, not only what it means for you and your family, but more importantly, what does it ultimately mean for the institution that you're supporting? By way of background, my name is Keith Conway. I am the president of the Fortes Group. I'm also joined by my partner here, Frank Solar, who's the CEO of the Fortes Group. We're a leading provider of real estate management advisory services and focus on families and nonprofits. We partner with wealth managers, estate planning attorneys, CPAs, and a bunch of professional services groups such as Pat and other real estate brokers to effectively incorporate real estate into wealth planning. And our firm has a specialty in working with donors and nonprofits to process real estate gifts. And we're pretty thrilled to talk about what that actually means and what that looks like today. Before we go ahead and get started, Pat, I want to hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, my name is Patricia Canali. I'm a double alumna of St. John's University. I am a real estate salesperson, but that is by title. By function, I serve as a real estate partner to individuals looking to sell, buy, or invest in real estate. And that real estate can be anything from a home to a business to land to a commercial building. And when I say partner, I think it's important to this conversation because we've talked about it before. Sometimes what happens is individuals will come directly to us, a real estate person, to discuss options about selling property or donating property. And if you have a trusted realtor that you that is your true fiduciary, that individual will help you navigate the process of all of the other pieces that are part and parcel of creating a financial plan. And Keith and Frank, their group is that kind of group. That's the avenue where you have a one-stop shop where you'll find people that can assist you in all things elder law, in wills and trusts and estates. And I believe that I have that correctly, right, Keith and Frank? You could not if that's the case, right? You have it all under your umbrella. So I think we work very well together. We are good partners, and that's the idea that I'd like to leave everybody with here today, is that when you're making a plan and something as substantive as this, you really need to develop a partnership with professionals that can help you accomplish your goals. So, and I work everywhere. I do the 5 boroughs of New York. I do Long Island up through Westchester and even out of state as needed. So, all right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And just word of, I guess, initial thought. Feel free to interject with questions as we go through. Some of these points may be complicated, may be exciting. Feel free to just ask questions along the way, and we can just make this discussion as conversational as possible. So, just to take a step back and talk a little bit about, essentially why we're here today and what the objective is. Nonprofits across the U.S., it's widely published that they're facing fundraising challenges. They're being asked to do more fundraising with less resources. Think about everything that's changed from a regulatory standpoint. Prices have gone up, wages are going up, and families are continuously struggling with the ability to give. However, the need for giving is as big as ever. Statistically, there's an excellent book called The Generosity Crisis by Brian Crimmins that I highly recommend folks take a look at. It talks about a bunch of the statistics around overall forecasts over the next few decades and the decline in giving, which everyone can be aware that that's an unfortunate thing that's going to happen. But if you are structured the right way and you are, I'd say, creative and partnering with your potential donors is to educate them on different ways to give, you can be on the side that's benefiting from some of the headwinds that are coming. Non-cash giving is one of the things that's on the rise, and Fidelity Charitable, which is the largest public charity in the nation, does an excellent annual report where they outline a lot of different statistics that they're seeing. And they stated their 2025 report should be coming out just about any day now, but in their 2024 report, they said that 63% of all contributions that were received from Fidelity Charitable were non-cash assets. So just think about that. Just almost 2/3 of what they had received were not coming in forms of cash or checks. So where is it coming from? It's coming from stock. It's coming from artwork. It's coming from jewelry. It's coming from real estate. It's coming from boats. But as you can imagine, for folks like Susan, right, it's much harder to accept. It's much harder to process those gifts and think about what is it worth. You ultimately want to try to translate that gift into cash so that the institution can actually use it. That's a process in itself. And I think the benefit of understanding that this can be an avenue and educating your donors on that opportunity allows you to accept more gifts, but it also potentially brings on more headaches to the group that has to process that. And the third point here in terms of context, real estate can be a powerful way to make a long-term impact. There's a lot of different ways you can potentially gift real estate, and just the overall wealth associated with real estate in the U.S. It's quoted that 43% of U.S. wealth is held in real estate. So it's a massive opportunity if you have the right partnerships to be able to execute it efficiently and effectively, so everyone has good experience. The purpose of today's call is really talk a little bit about introduce the group, talk how, most importantly, different strategies can be deployed, and educate you all on not only the strategies but the benefits with regard to real estate charitable donations, and also provide a number of resources to the extent you all want to educate yourself following. We're going to go through a couple case studies. But as Pat kind of mentioned earlier, something of this magnitude, something that's such a big potential impact to not only your family, but St. John's University, you ultimately want to spend an appropriate amount of time to understand all the different complexities and options associated with it. So as I mentioned earlier, we truthfully believe that at the Fortes Group, the real estate is an underutilized charitable giving asset. With 43% of U.S. wealth held in real estate, it's estimated that only 2% of annual donations are made with real estate. So there's a big disconnect there. And as you can imagine, it's probably not because there's lack of interest. It's probably more so because of the complexities and headaches associated with it. I'm sure, Susan, you can probably share some stories of some times where you may have been associated with a gift or a potential gift. And it's probably difficult. And there's probably a lot of work that you had to pull in to process that. I'm sure it was meaningful to the institution, but can often be a less than comfortable situation to be thrown into something like that and have to drive that end to end, along with everything else that is going on in running the program at St. John's. We got into this business because we were recognizing with some of the families we were working with that they were getting shown the door effectively from some of the nonprofits if they were trying to gift the real estate. They were kind of looking at more so to be already turned into cash. And if it's already turned into cash, then you're lacking the tax benefits that are associated with it. Unfortunately, what ended up happening that we were seeing was the magnitude of the impact that someone could be making to the nonprofit was ultimately suffering. So we stepped in this business to alleviate that and to work directly with nonprofits to be a support system to say, hey, when these opportunities arise, know that you can say yes more frequently and you have a partner who's going to support you to drive that process forward. To take a step back, and I'm sure the question that people think is, as a potential donor, why would I consider giving my real estate? And what situations does that make sense? And more importantly, how does it benefit an institution like St. John's? First and foremost, what comes up very frequently is the tax benefits associated with giving real estate. Real estate oftentimes is a very highly appreciated asset. Somebody who's owned something for 20, 30, 40 years. There's a cost basis, particularly if it's investment property or it's a second home. And if you ultimately sell that, you're going to pay some sort of gains. By leveraging some of the charitable donation strategies, you're able to have some tax mitigation involved with the sale of that, which can, again, benefit your personal estate, but also can potentially lead to an outsized gift that can be given to the end nonprofit. Thinking about real estate just gives you another option in the context of when you're thinking about trying to give to an institution. It should be another opportunity that you assess across your overall estate, alongside cash, alongside stock, alongside other assets to consider, is this something that makes sense for myself and the institution that I'll be ultimately giving to? And within the realm of real estate, there are a few different options that we'll get to that you can explore around potentially giving a partial interest gift, potentially giving a full gift, potentially solving for other areas that may make sense for you, like it's an income producing asset. I still need to live off that income for a certain period of time. There are ways you can solve for that. I think thirdly, sure.
I have a question. So an individual makes the decision that they'd like to donate their home to St. John's University. Does St. John's University accept that gift as the home and then liquidate it through St. John's, or does it get liquidated prior to that?
So I'd say there's a few steps in that process that we may have skipped over. I think
Okay.
first and foremost, most people don't just decide I'm going to give something.
Right.
Most people are trying to understand the overall picture. So after they understand the overall picture of what strategy they're going to go, they may select, and I think in your example, you're positioning an outright gift. If they have selected an outright gift, there are a few options. One, if Susan believes that there's something right in the neighborhood of St. John's University that can sell very quickly and she wants to take that on, then that's an avenue that, yes, she can accept that and then liquidate it and turn it into cash. There are other options where we get involved, where the university says we don't want to take on that liability. There's
Right.
debt, it's a hairy asset. It may be commercial, it may be office space, and people are a little bit concerned around office space as an asset class, and there's high vacancy. And you need to identify a buyer, and that may take a period of months, potentially a year or longer, and there's risk associated with that. So what we have done is work with a national nonprofit who we together assess the viability of that sale, and we'll take on that risk associated with that asset, knowing that ultimately we will liquidate it within our nonprofit group, and then St. John's University is named as that beneficiary, as that gift. So we take out that risk in that process for Susan and her team, and they just essentially wait for the check or the cash, if that's what they want to do.
And I asked that question because I have had that experience where they actually donated the asset, the the house. And then it went through, like you said, various iterations, but I was just curious if those attending might find that interesting, that it doesn't necessarily have to be liquidated.
Just a comment,
Right.
John. Susan, like Keith identified, don't have to accept the gift if they're not comfortable accepting it, and they can use people like Keith and his group to be able to eliminate those risks. Those risks are maintaining that property, the cost of it, people falling, breaking, getting sued. The university does not want that liability 99% of the time, nor the headache in going through the process alone. So there are obviously fees for businesses like Keith to be able to make that, but that's the cost of, or the insurance policy to getting it to St. John's. It makes it easy with no risk to get it to them. So it's still beneficial to the university or any other non-for-profit to accept those. And the other important part is that many of the non-for-profits are not set up to take on real estate. They don't even know how to do it. So I'm sorry, just want to help facilitate that.
Yeah.
No, that's very helpful, and those spots are spot on. Frank, you're going to say something?
Yeah, just the one thing to set the table, and Keith, I'm sure you'll get to it just because Susan mentioned it, is I think what people need to contextualize as well is we're not actually talking about most people's primary residence, right? That can be a great legacy gift that someone leaves more of within like a life estate context, right? At the end of your life, you can, have the deed transferred to St. John's. And of course we could be helpful there. What we're seeing in the space is a lot of assets that end up being a challenge from an estate planning perspective or a management perspective or a utility perspective for a family. So we see a lot of land that's inherited or not really producing any income for a family, but is valuable to some real estate developer that can be sold and create a big gift for St. John's, or vacation homes that, maybe your kids or grandkids are really spending more time in a different part of the country and it's not really that utilized, or business property. Maybe some of you have old business property or inherited property. It's that type of property that can be really powerful and generally isn't providing a lot of value or income to you. And I think that what Keith's going to get to is we can now take that and make an outsized gift relative to what you might make from a cash or stock perspective, right? And also create some really good tax and income benefits for you along the way. So I don't want people to just think about those types of assets, whether for you or people in your network who might have those type of assets and be looking to be philanthropic, but might not have, the type of cash or stock or liquidity to make a really meaningful gift.
Thank you, Frank. I'm glad you said that about the main residence. I can give two examples to the audience. There's one real estate gift that I had closed many years ago. We were just talking about Florida, and we know everybody, a lot of people retired down to Florida. There was a couple that owned a duplex in Manhattan, and they didn't have any children, so they didn't know who to leave it to. They were concerned about the capital gains tax. And so what they did was they set that up as a charitable remainder uni trust, which they get a variable rate on. And that real estate, and I know Keith will get into this, that property will fund the CRUT. And they were able to avoid the capital gains tax. They were also getting income on that trust. and then the university, when they pass on, will receive that gift because we're the beneficiary of that trust. It was sort of a seamless process, but if you have a Keith and a Frank, it's more seamless. But it was very beneficial to that donor. And I thought that was really creative and a great way to still utilize that property, because you still have sort of that investment. You're not really giving it up. You're just transferring it into a better vehicle. And then just recently I was visiting someone in Florida, and there are scenarios where the family just doesn't want that summer home or the mountain home, so they were talking to me and they're like, we don't really know, what are we going to do? No one wants the home. And again, I shared with them different ways in which maybe they would like to gift it and it could benefit their portfolio. So that's what, Keith, I think now we're going to get into, of what are the benefits.
Yeah, I appreciate all the examples because I think it really helps bring it to life. And the scenarios that you're bringing up are what we hear frequently. The mass migration down south and someone having the home in Vermont, or there being a situation where someone still needs to create income and they're not really sure how to do it, but they want to make an impact. And it's really the education on the front end that allows people to assess those. I'll talk quickly on the right-hand side just to address it. I think these are pretty straightforward. Why does it work for a nonprofit? It's because it's just another avenue to engage their donors on potentially making an impact on the university. Research shows that nonprofits that accept non-cash donations grow at an accelerated rate. So it's just, continue to have the conversation around if there are other ways aside from cash or checks that make sense for a potential donor, and having that ability to say, yes, we can help you ultimately make that gift. So let's talk a little bit about the how, right? What solves for, I'd say, 80+% of the times that we engage a donor is they're falling into one of three categories. They're trying to maximize income that's being produced from an asset while making an impact. They're trying to maximize the impact of their gift, or they're trying to find some sort of balance between generating income or having some small proceeds that come from the sale, but also making some sort of gift. Really what it comes down to is painting the broader picture. What's going to be the size of the gift? What's going to be the tax benefit to the donor and their family? And then how does the process look, and what are the different parties that kind of come into it? And sometimes some of these options require some assumptions made by a financial advisor. For example, someone who wants to set up a charitable remainder trust, they may decide that they wanted to reinvest that into outside of real estate. Maybe that's into the stock market. And the financial advisor will have an input as to, if we reinvest some of these proceeds, this is what we can project out the value to be and your gift to be. An outright gift generally comes with, giving pretty much what it sounds like, giving the gift outright, getting the max tax deduction for that gift that you can take over a few year cycle if you can't take all the benefit in 1 year. And that gift is truly, giving the essentially the maximum value to the end beneficiary or the nonprofit. And then I said, the middle ground, it's a partial interest gift. You can give a portion of the gift at closing. You can actually split the deed at closing, and you'll get a pro rata tax benefit at closing within that year. You can do things like a bargain sale, where you essentially sell at a discount to an institution, and you'll get a tax credit for the portion that would essentially equal to the full value that it might have sold at. So these can be complicated, but I think we try to simplify it a little bit and solve for the majority of donors, where you sit down and you say, okay, you want to explore a real estate gift option. Let's talk about what that could look like, and what are your other goals you're trying to solve for. Is it income focused? Is it maximum tax deduction focused, or somewhere in the middle? And then work with your accountant, your estate planning attorney, all the different teams and folks like Pat, the broker, to figure out what is the actual value of that asset, to come up with some sort of plan and hard numbers that, I should say, soft numbers that you can, look at and say, okay, generally this is what I believe not only the gift is going to look like, but the tax and financial implications to our estate look like. I want to pause there and see if there are any questions from folks on the line.
I'll be glad to just add some observations. And Keith, that was a great overview. I think what's most important is that the person who knows the client best, whoever they're working with at the time, should make it known that there's no one option for them. I think a lot of times, and you started out this conversation a little bit early in the presentation, that people don't know what they don't know, or they assume what they know is the only way to do it. And they don't realize that they have all these options. I happen to be a CPA and a CFP, so I am very blessed with that background and knowledge to help them understand the implications of both ways. One, for their own cash flow in their own life, they may need some of the income, make it like a charitable remainder trust. There's different ways to do this. Making sure that they get with a qualified real estate professional. They write estate planning attorney to look at it from an estate tax planning standpoint, because not everybody has an estate tax issue, but they may or may not want it to be going through their estate for other reasons. They have to have up-to-date sessions. Things change in their life with their beneficiaries. Somebody who they thought was going to get it, and then the kids decide, I don't want to move to Florida. I got my business up here. I'm not going to be moving there, and that's just going to be a headache. There's so many conversations that need to be had, but the sooner they have it, and I have to say this, while they have the capacity to make those decisions, is what's going to make it so much easier, not only for them and possibly their cash flow during their lifetime, if they ever needed it for long-term care possibilities, but also for their heirs. Heirs love to take their money and run, is what I find out, for whatever reasons that they need it for. Some are successful with their kids or their families or whoever they're leaving it to, and others are not and are more desperate and they need liquidity. So a professional, whoever is going to be closest to them and work with the other professionals, is probably the most important part, is to start to take these steps early and sooner, so that they know what's going to happen later, and then just adjust those plans accordingly. However, once they make these determinations and they're confident that they don't need these assets right away or need to retain it for income purposes, that it's not money, it's not real estate that's going to be sitting idle either. A lot of times they may need this money during their lifetime, and then they can pass it on later on. So summary there, and I don't mean to be long-winded, is that working together with the right professionals will give people the comfort in knowing that they have options and they may be changing over a period of time during their lifetime. So it doesn't have to be a static decision. But once they do make the decision and put it into some kind of trust or otherwise, and get their charitable deduction when they probably need it most during their lifetime, is something that they have to have a well-versed team that will work in coordination and collaborate. Sorry.
No, thanks, John. I don't know if you've ever attended one of our Meet the Experts, you'd probably know who John Separano is. He's a wealth manager and an alumnus of St. John's University that always helps us. So I'm glad you came on the call, John. I appreciate it. I would like to share a personal experience myself right now. I'm in the middle of that situation, which John is helping me, and I'm seeking a team as well, because it's two families involved in real estate, residential and commercial, that have been with my family for centuries. My grandfather was very savvy, came over to Italy, and he bought lots of property. And the property's been in the family for many, many years. It was part of a family business for over 75 years. And I grew up with that property. And I know when I'm working with potential donors, because I know for myself, like sometimes that property, that was like our home. That's where my grandparents lived. It's very emotional. Like I know my grandfather worked very hard to have that property and maintain it. And now that it's in my hands, because my family now, my father passed on and my uncle is aging and he doesn't want to maintain the property anymore. I feel the responsibility, like this is my grandfather's legacy, and I want to make sure that I do it in the right way possible. And I realized at one point, I was just talking to the real estate people, and I said, oh my God, how hypocritical of me, because here I have these seminars for everybody else to show them that it's a team approach. You can't just, rely on one person to help you through this process. And also, it's very difficult if you're the family member trying to organize all this yourself with another family. Let me tell you, it's been many years that we've been talking about selling this property, and no one could see eye to eye. When my father passed away, I saw an opportunity for us to sell the property because my mother wouldn't have to get the capital gains tax. But psychologically, my grandfather wasn't ready to sell that property. I mean, not my grandfather, my uncle. And so that was a little bit tug of war, to try to convince him, like, this is really a good opportunity now, but he didn't want to. So it's taken 8 years to convince him to finally say, we're ready to sell this property. So if any of you are listening and you're in that similar situation of there's an emotional attachment or you're involved with other families, that's why I have these power lunches, because if you're not brought up in a family that has a family foundation and very wealthy, when we say money goes to money, they have the advisors, they know how to get around all of this to make money, more money for you. But if you don't have those resources, sometimes you're going to make mistakes, and it could be costly mistakes from what I can see. And I don't want to do that for my family. So I hope this call will all help you if it's something that you didn't even think about, or having these types of conversations that I'm going through. It's really important. You may have to pay a little bit, but in the long run, to have advisors there to help you and support you and make the right decisions, I would say that's the best route to take. So I'm sorry, Keith, if we took too much from you,
And
because I know
I
you had a
just
great
wanted to,
case.
yeah, I just wanted to add something quick, that no one should ever feel badly about that, Susan, because the truth is I work with that population of people on the right regularly, and there is always an emotional component that takes part, and sometimes not sometimes, it's always an evolution. It evolves from it goes through so many iterations before the final outcome. So it's a very common thing. It's it's more so that way than any other way. It's emotional, and I've seen it emotional on commercial property too that's been in the family a long time, mixed use property. So it's not uncommon at all. And to John's point, I just wanted to make this quick statement. So you set something up, but you need to remember that you have to revisit it periodically, because what happens is you set something up and you forget. And then at the time where you're interested, you've passed on and you've left this to your family, that wasn't at all what you wanted. But because you never modified any of the decisions you made throughout the lifetime of whatever that trust, or you need to do that. You need to periodically review it, because I've seen that a lot also.
Susan, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's very helpful to contextualize. Frank, did you want to say something? I saw you come
Yeah,
up
no, I
and
just wanted to piggyback on that, Susan, with a real life story of something we just did, which is really cool. There was an individual that came to us through a financial advisor, who already had intent to fund a scholarship program in the name of his family, right? To an institution that was very important to them and his upbringing. And they didn't really have the assets to make the kind of gift to fund a long-term scholarship program, right? This wasn't, hey, I want to make $100,000 gift to a building and buy, have a wing or a room named after me. This was, they want a continued legacy of scholarships given to students that looked like him when he was younger, in that school. And the only thing he had of that magnitude was the house he grew up in Brooklyn. It's the only thing he had, and it was being used for a family friend to live there. Wasn't making a lot of money. They were barely charging them because they were a family friend. And it was fortunate that family friend is moving down to the Carolinas, And just before the end of the year, we were able to get that home, which was a very emotional thing for him to give up, right, and to donate. But he's donated it. It's, you know, just under $1 million, which is an incredible gift to make to the institution and fund scholarship programs. And for him emotionally, it was, now my family can have a really long-term legacy, right? And change what is a kind of a hairy asset for us to manage in reality, even though emotionally, you know, he learned to walk and run in the place, right? And he changed that now to something that he can be proud of and talk about the impact that his family and his parents made. So I think that's a really cool thing. We're seeing a lot of these stories of people who may have a lot of means or may have modest means from a cash or a stock and overall balance sheet perspective. This is not reserved for the ultra high net worth person, and able to make a really outsized impact just because a little house in Brooklyn that sold for $50,000 40 years ago is now worth $900,000, right? I'm sure everybody here has kids or grandkids trying to buy a home these days, and the prices are ridiculous. That's a challenge in one respect, but from another vantage point, that's an incredible opportunity to make impact, like this individual did.
Thank you, Frank. So I do want to leave time for questions. So I'll reserve about 15 minutes for questions, but ahead of that, and we just shared some great case studies that I think hopefully bring this to life a little bit. But would like to just share one case study to bring it to life a little bit and actually talk some of the numbers that are associated. So we use Aunt Patty as an example of an actual donor, but obviously took the name from being shared. In her 60s, in conversations with financial advisors around estate planning, already philanthropic, giving annually, had 2 children who had relocated to another state and had a lake home that they were these days infrequently using, that was highly appreciated, and it was in the general range of $2.5 million now. And she wanted to explore ultimately what she could do to make an impact, leveraging that asset, knowing that they were probably going to end up selling that in the near term. And maybe there's some way that they could have made an impact by leveraging that asset. So we got brought in to consult and to tell her what her options were, and without knowing whether this was a viable option or not, just have a conversation around what it could look like and work with her wealth advisor, who also brought in her accountant to talk about these various options and just put hard numbers to paper as to the potential impact. And after some conversations with her team of trusted advisors that she's working with a long time, it really came down to 2 potential options around what are you trying to solve for? And does it come from, again, trying to potentially generate some income, or do you feel good about your personal cash flow situation, and you want to have some sort of tax deduction that will result in you being able to take a tax deduction over a number of years? The benefits associated with each, I touched on a little bit earlier, but like I said, a charitable remainder trust, there's a lot of technical terms under the umbrella of charitable remainder trust, CRUTs, NUMCRUTs, etc. One, Susan had mentioned earlier, which as we go down the funnel and learn about the different options, those become more part of the conversation. But initially, some of the things you can consider when trying to explore a charitable remainder trust is a deferral of capital gains, a tax deduction in year that can be helpful to offset income taxes or just capital gains on assets, as well as an annual distribution that you can make either yourself a beneficiary of, your children a beneficiary of, other people beneficiaries of, in addition to making charitable impact and giving a charity some sort of cash flow, or you can structure that some other ways where they may get a outsized benefit down the road. The outright gift option was more so, going down the avenue of funding a donor advised fund, which is a vehicle that is a charitable vehicle where you can make contributions to multiple nonprofits. But what this does is allow you to avoid capital gains at that sale, receive a charitable deduction for the fair market value of that donation, and have a professionally managed team, if you would like, such as your financial advisor, manage that donor advised fund, and again, try to grow the overall ability to make an impact and Those were the two options, like I said, kind of like large tax deductions selling for income. Where we ultimately landed was, she wanted to go the route of the outright gift. And I think what's really important here is kind of that bottom line. If she had decided to go forward and sell that asset at $2.5 million, she would have had a large tax bill, essentially. By then, she can make her donation. By essentially doing the outright gift strategy and then being able to take those tax deductions versus giving the cash after the sale, she's able to get a larger tax deduction, and there's a meaningful federal tax income benefit that she received with her overall estate. So if you net that out, there's 160% increase in tax savings. She was able to remove that asset from the taxable estate, which some of the points that John made earlier around sometimes that makes sense for a family, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it was helpful for their overall plan. And there was a 20% increase in the impact that she made to the nonprofit. So just think about that from, again, just there are often times where people are considering, I want to leverage this asset to potentially make an impact. It's important to make sure that you are thinking about it in the right way to make sure you can make the biggest impact possible. And there's a process associated with it. Whereas if you were to sell, then make the impact, there's a smaller benefit that goes to your estate and the nonprofit. If you structure it appropriately on the front end, you can have a much more meaningful impact. So again, I promise I paused there to leave about 15 minutes for questions. I want to thank our panelists, our attendees, and happy to take any questions that we may have from the audience at this point.
Don't be shy. You have these experts free right now. Thank you, Keith, Pat, and Frank. I appreciate it. And John on the sidelines.
So I have a question then. So
Okay.
for the group, it's not really for me, but so because we know that often people think real estate, they go to their trusted realtor, correct? So someone will come to me. And then we start talking about, this particular asset, what you're looking to do with it. Do you have a mortgage on it, capital gains implications, a whole series of things. Because remember, we don't just turn the key and open the door for people to take a look at a house. We're there to be part of their trusted team. What's the road that I would take? So I'm sitting with a client and I say, have you ever considered a charitable gift? And they say, you know what, I never have. And then I go into a little bit about how the benefit to a lot of things, a lasting legacy, your taxing implications, etc. What's the next step for them? What do I advise them to do as their next step if your company, the Fortes Group, would be the right group for them? Do I call you up? Do I introduce them? What do you expect of them? Tell me what that looks like.
Sure. There's a number of ways you can get in touch with us: email, phone call. We have a website, realestateplandgiving.com, a bunch of educational resources, a questionnaire to fill out some of the initial information to guide a little bit about what a strategy might look like for you, your family, and your estate. But the initial piece is a conversation. Have you engaged your CPA? Do you know what this means? You engage your wealth manager? Do you have a team of trusted advisors? Are there any gaps in that team that you need help filling? I've never worked with an estate planning attorney before. I need some guidance. This is a new topic for myself and my family. We have partners that we can bring in, that we can refer. We have the great ability to collaborate with that individual's trusted team of parties. And I think the beauty of how we engage, that we're unbiased towards the outcome. We don't really necessarily care what route you take. We want to be a partner, and we want to solve for what the best outcome is for an individual, their family, and hopefully a nonprofit as well.
Is there typically a charge for that first introduction, like that first conversation?
No.
Yeah, I would say that you want to make sure they get to people that have an unbiased or objective or an independent circumstance. You know, Keith and Frank's group is going to want to help these people, and so do I when people approach me. But the question is do they know all the facts? Do they have a trusted advisor they're starting with? They may come to you and you may bring up about the real estate, but has somebody really looked at the comprehensive nature of how it impacts their financial planning overall,
Right.
which incorporates
Spot on.
all the things
Which
that
is what we would, I mean, a good realtor, I mean, it's exactly what they would discuss, that they need to speak with.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm suggesting that you're going down the right path. What I'm
yeah,
saying is what I have found out, even when I'm not the person that ultimately does the tax return or creates the
right.
estate plan or executes a real estate contract or facilitates a charitable gift and everything else. What they appreciate most is that each of you and myself are have enough of a network to know who to tap and who to,
Exactly.
and
That's exactly.
hopefully we have had the experience with the people we're referring to in order for the client to feel comfortable and you feel comfortable, because none of us want to get egg on our face that somebody we refer to doesn't have the experience. So that is critical. Quite frankly, me getting on this phone call, I met you before, Patricia, but I don't know Keith that well, and I don't know Frank. I'm reaching out like I did after the last session, and my network of people that I can tap for the circumstances that arise. Oh, it's the most critical issue and value that I find for my clients. Not just what I can do, but who I know should be on that team at the right time to facilitate
That's
the.
exactly right, John. That's exactly right. It's not about whether you are actively involved in the transaction, but more about helping the client achieve whatever their goals are by putting them on the right path to do that with trusted resources.
Yeah, Keith used something that I use all the time is that there's no gaps in planning. The average person, what they wind up doing is they go to an attorney by themselves, they go to a
Yep.
real estate person by themselves, they go to the investment person, they go to the insurance person, and everybody has their niche and then sometimes their agenda if they're pushing some product or service. But if they're acting as some form of fiduciary to help facilitate getting things done and looking out for the client's best interest, which is what we would hope everybody gets, um, then that person will know when to say, hey, we need to bring in these other experts to coordinate and collaborate.
I'm just curious, if you go to the react button in Zoom, how many people on this call were not really aware of how to make a donation to a charity through real estate? Is this new for everybody, or if everybody could just hit the react button, if you could raise your hand? Okay, Laura didn't know. Okay. So it
Good
seems like
question.
everybody else pretty much knew. Okay.
But I
Um,
will say most people do not. You have a much savvier
mm,
audience. Most people do not. They don't.
yeah, I would say in my experience, anyone that I've talked to at St. John's, when I share different ways, different types of plant gifts, they would never think about, real estate. Like I said, I spoke to this one couple that said, well, they were just saying it in passing. My kids don't want, the house upstate.
Or they
Um,
assume St. John's doesn't want it. That's the other big one. A lot of people
right.
assume,
Yeah.
well,
Hmm.
why would St. John's want a house in Syracuse, New York?
Right.
Like, what are they going to do
Mhm.
with that? And the point
Right.
is that
They
it
think
doesn't
St.
matter.
John's wants the books, the old books that the library now is not really even taking in the books. And while some of them, there could be some valuable books and books that instruct, that would help the academic side. I'm not saying books are all bad, but overall books now are not as welcoming as they used to be, but something like this, and I love the example you gave, Frank, of, the house and everything was someone's legacy, but it still continues to be a legacy when you sell it and you give it to an organization, and that money can go to helping, like I said, my student associate and his fellow students with their education and to help them with furthering their future careers. So it is something really, to think about. And it's a great gift because, like Keith pointed out, the savings in so many different ways. So anyone else, we're getting close to 1 o'clock. Anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. No question's a bad one. We'd love to hear from you and your feedback. Anyone would like to give us some feedback? Was this something good? Did you learn something from it? What other types of power lunches you'd like to hear? Feedback is great. We'd love to hear from you.
It was
Come
a
on,
great
Steve.
meeting. It's a
I
great
love
meeting.
Steve.
Huh.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Oh, good. Anything you'd like to see in the future? Anything more about real estate that you think we can offer to the alumni?
I could talk to them, I don't want to be self-serving, but I'm a HECM specialist. I do reverse mortgages, and some of the elders want to downsize, and there's a product out there called the HECM for Purchase where they can downsize and reverse the balance and move in. If you want to kick that in as a subset of a bigger meeting, I wouldn't make a whole meeting out of it, but it's a service to seniors that I can offer. And I don't want to get into it too much.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like real estate in many cases is the thing that they think about last. And I think that kind
Right.
of evident.
Right.
The reality is real estate clearly can be the biggest headache to get rid of if you're not thinking about it before it actually happens. So that's what I was saying, being proactive and knowing this. When it comes to the content of giving things away, people have to have a charitable intent. And what they find out, especially the ones that don't have families, real estate and IRAs or real estate in IRAs are the best assets to try to get rid of sooner than later, or at least plan for it. So having those conversations and being proactive, you're not pushing anybody to do anything. You're just making them aware what their choices are. And that is critical as a professional to provide those services, because they are, like we said today, are not thinking about it first because they're going, I can give cash, or I can give them some of my stocks, my bonds, because it's probably been talked about more in the media than anything else.
Yeah.
And real estate winds up being probably one of their biggest assets.
Right.
I'm also finding out that in my position, that as people get older, some of the people they wanted to get about, their relationships have changed or they moved away and they don't want those assets wherever they are, Syracuse, Florida, Idaho, whatever they are. And I've talked to clients in all those kind of states and all over the place. And kids are not moving because you die. I hate to say it, just not the thing. It's nice to have a beachside house and this and that until the kids realize that they got just the house and they didn't get cash. And the cost to maintain the house on a beach somewhere down in Florida may be outside of something they're comfortable with. And then they have, if you give it to like 3 kids or 4 kids, now everybody can chip in, and everybody can maintain it. So it's why those family discussions are really important way ahead of time, in order to facilitate having professionals like this be able to weigh in and say, well, here's some things you can structure, or when you should think about structuring it before you leave the kids with a ticking time bomb to have to deal with it later. So that's what I would leave on.
I know we have a couple minutes. I don't know how long this will take to answer. This question is for Keith and Frank. But when someone decides on funding a trust with real estate, when they transfer that real estate over to the charitable organization, the person gets credit for which amount? The amount that was transferred over to fund the trust, or is it the amount that the university sold the real estate for?
So 2 different scenarios.
Okay.
I'll answer quick. So if you're going to do the charitable remainder trust option, right, you get it for the present value of what St. John's is ultimately going to get down the road, right? Essentially. If you do an outright gift scenario where, right, you're going to give it to us and we're going to take it and then sell it and give it to the cash of St. John's, you get it for the fair market value that's appraised at the time of transferring the asset. So that's really the two avenues there. In both cases, what it's sold for actually doesn't really impact. It's usually what it's sold for and what it appraised. It's always on the appraisal.
It's on the appraisal, right?
Yeah.
And you have to get it qualified. I mean, this is something that not everybody always knows, and I hate to say it, sometimes advisors don't know this, is a qualified appraisal in order to determine that value. And that we have a charitable advisor on staff with us, and believe it or not, when I show him these qualified appraisals, he looks at me and he says, they think this isn't a qualified appraisal, and it isn't. And sometimes it comes down to, which, this is over the years that I've been doing this work. Sometimes it comes down to just maybe one or two, three little words. And he'll say, because the way this is worded, it's not considered qualified. And I'm like, really? And I mean, something like really simple. But he said, it's really amazing how a lot of advisors don't really know the true, the right way of putting together a qualified appraisal. So you do have to be careful and make sure that you're doing it the right way. That I would say in my experience, what I've found when it comes down to qualified appraisals. Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed this presentation. Again, I want to thank Keith and Frank and Pat and John. Thank you so much for attending. Please give us your feedback. Luke will definitely send you contact information on everybody if you want to contact them if you have more questions. We will be sending the recording, so if maybe it was a little overwhelming and you want to go back, you can go back and review it. And again, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. I'll forward it to the appropriate person, or you can contact Keith, Pat, Frank, and we're including John's contact information for that. But thank you again, and we hope you see us at all the events.